So I get more questions about this polytunnel than anything else that I do on the allotment. So I thought I would just kind of walk around and answer all the questions that I can think of. So first off, it's a First Tunnels polytunnel. It's 20 foot long by 10 foot wide. And I got the extra strengthening elements on it. You know, these little bits here that sort of firm it up a little bit to increase its tolerance to high wind loads, because it's pretty windy here, close to the sea. And I highly recommend it. You know, all of these extra sort of strengthening bits and pieces, crop bars and all that sort of thing. Yeah, really useful. So I did originally have trestle tables all the way along here. These two segments I've taken out. The trestle tables are 32 inches above the ground level, but the little beds, the raised beds, are 6 inches, so they're about 26 inches above the beds. The beds themselves, they're open bottomed, so plants can grow as deep as they want. When I originally filled them, I filled them with horse manure for the bottom 3 inches and mushroom compost for the top 3 inches. Mushroom compost is a little bit finer than horse manure, and it's worked really nicely. Each year I add about 1 inch, because I haven't got room, you know, basically as much as it shrinks, of cow manure. It's actually probably not strictly cow manure, it's the bedding from the cow sheds, so that includes quite a bit of wood, but it's really well composted and never get any weed problems or anything like that. And have these little stepping stones in here in winter, so that I can get, you know, all the way to the back of the beds to harvest and all that sort of thing. And so I can reach from the ends, I can reach every bit of the bed, you know, really easily. I've got 2 stepping stones, another one there. And as I say, the beds themselves are 6 inches. Now this little shelf here is removable, and it's just kind of hooked on with these wires to these braces here. And yeah, it's just a really sparse trestle table, basically, with 3 slate battens, I think. And it just slots down the back of this raised bed here, so it's kind of out of the way in summer when I want to grow tomatoes in this spot here. And then onto this I've clipped this fleece. It's a 30-gram fleece, so basically nothing in here is ever going to freeze if I don't want it to. I only really put this on when there's a hard frost, so something beyond about -3, and it's about, yeah, so it's 3 foot off here. There's no shade at all, because the orientation of this polytunnel is roughly east-west. It's not quite, because east-west is kind of like that, I think. So it's just slightly skewed east, but it's as close as I can get and still be square on the plot. Which means that that side is south and this side is north. So basically this is the cold side, and so this fleece just acts as like a warm double layer to keep this bed a bit warmer than it would otherwise be. And I can drop this fleece down over this bed and also right out here to the middle of the tunnel. And so all the things in pots down here can also be covered. This side, as I say, is south. It's got gutters on both sides. Light levels here are really good. Well, they're all really good, because the polythene is this translucent polythene, and it diffuses the light. So a light, you know, you can imagine the light coming in, hitting it, and then it kind of gets diffused into a broad spread. And that means there's no real dark spots in the polytunnel. The light is just diffused everywhere. It's a really interesting quality of light you get in a polytunnel, and it's really super relaxing. There's something kind of that it does to the brain, which I can't explain, but I've mentioned this on previous videos, and loads of other people have said in the comments that they get the same feeling of kind of tranquility And it's because I think of the high light levels and the diffused nature of the light and the privacy that you get in a polytunnel. Right, so I'll talk about the gutters later. So these little beds are 2.5 feet. I'm sorry for doing everything in imperial, but that's how I grew up. And they are, at the ends, I've got these little sort of areas here. They're 2 foot long, and they're just the perfect size to put big containers. And I like to have a lot of space for big containers and bins and, you know, various little bits and pieces. I just like places to stuff things out of the way. And I'd say I like containers in here. That's why I've got the big path. Well, for 2 reasons really. One is I use this space a lot to sort of sit out and sort of chill. And so I like somewhere to sit. So I sort of like this sense of space that I've got in here, even in summer, by having this long sort of corridor down here with a bit of space. I can't cope with watering the whole polytunnel because we don't have, well, they discourage us from watering too much on this allotment site. And if this whole polytunnel was soil, that would be an enormous amount of water. So it would double probably the amount of water that I need. And right now, you know, basically I'm at the limit really as to what I feel I can water. So, and that's just like logistically, just the amount of time and effort it takes to water, but also the amount of water that I can capture and the sort of attitude, as I say, of the council to excessive watering. So this is kind of like the balance. So I have a lot of containers in here over winter when there's not much watering required, and I have a lot of containers in here in spring, again when there's not much water required. I don't have any really containers in here in the summer, I just have the space. So why do I have all these containers? Well, it's just great to start things and overwinter things in here and then get them outside in spring. So this celery can go outside, these carrots can go outside, the potatoes that will be down here in sort of very early spring, they can go outside in May. The courgettes that will be in here, the beans that will be in here, all these sorts of things can all be started in here in containers and then shifted outside as the weather warms up. And I really like that flexibility. And as you can see, I've got a lot of hanging baskets in here, and again I really like the ability to have loads and loads of hanging baskets. So right now these hanging baskets have got lettuces in them, they will then have strawberries in them, and then they might have like pak choy in them later on. You could have cucumbers in them, you could, of course, I have loads of tomatoes in them, and again those tomatoes go outside in sort of, you know, late May sort of time. So I'm not all cluttered up with masses of hanging baskets in summer. So let's just have a quick look what's in here. Got lettuces all the way down here, all lettuces, salad onions interplanted. These are all carrots. These are miner's lettuce, more miner's lettuce, more miner's lettuce, tatsoi and komatsuma, celery, more lettuce, more lettuce, more lettuce, red pak choy, a few seedlings. So I really like having these 2 trestle tables at the end here, and you know, it's just great to have some space to sort of put stuff. Loads of space for seedling trays, loads of space for things that are in here for a short period of time and then get moved out. The very ends, where I've got all, basically the whole trestle table covered, are for storage, so I'm not shading stuff out. What I have planted in here right now is miner's lettuce, and it can cope with low light levels, so it doesn't really get affected by the fact that it's got the trestle table over, and it's helped by the fact that the sun is coming in low, so it's really coming in through this part here of the polytunnel rather than this part of the polytunnel. This part here is kind of illuminating this bed here. This part here is illuminating this bed here. So really the trestle table isn't really shading anything. It's basically shading this part here, which obviously is a path, so it doesn't really matter. The polytunnel itself is one of these that's on rails, So the polythene is trapped, well, it's fastened, I should say, it's fastened to these rails. These rails can be undone and the polythene can be re-stretched. I mean, I've had this polytunnel 6 years, I think, and it hasn't needed to be re-stretched. It's still really drum tight. So to be honest, I kind of wonder whether it was worth even having these rails, because obviously they had quite a lot of expense and I haven't needed to retighten it. But it served me well. I'm probably going to have it replaced in 1 or 2 years though, which will be a bit of a pain. I have double doors at both ends and I love these double doors. Absolutely fantastic, and I can adjust them to pretty much any position. I mean, this one I just can only adjust it to this position, but this one I can adjust it to here, 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 or here, and at that point it's fully closed. So I really like that, because when it's really windy there's always one door basically that you can have open, and so you get really good ventilation and free flow. So normally I have that door, or the windy side, open maybe 6 inches or something like that, and then I'll have the non-windy side open a lot. And for most of these veggies, particularly at this time of year, well, it's any time of year really, they don't really need to have the doors closed, because polythene doesn't keep the contents of the polytunnel warm. What it does is it keeps the wind off them, and it keeps excessive rain off them, and it gets really warm during the day, and it heats the soil, the beds of the soil, and it heats the paths. And then at night, those beds re-radiate the heat and keep the veggies warm. So it's not so much that the polythene is keeping them warm, it's that the beds are nice and hot because they've gathered all that heat during the day and they're releasing it at night. And so if you want to keep your veggies warmer, you put your fleece down over them. And then that traps the heat that's being re-radiated, and through convection as well, from the beds, and it traps it low down here to the plants, and that's what keeps them warm. It's not really the polythene. If you look at the temperature in this polytunnel at night, it's generally the same temperature as the outside, or maybe a little bit less, because there's no air movement in here. So actually air movement is kind of heat. So when you've got free flow of air, not only are you reducing the humidity at night, but you're also increasing the temperature very, very slightly, although I wouldn't really fuss over that particular aspect of it. So yeah, I mean, there is this kind of myth, I think, that you're trying to trap the heat in at night, but really it just radiates out through this roof as quickly as anything. So within a couple of hours, basically the polytunnel is sort of back down to the same temperature as outside. So fleece is definitely your friend if you want to keep things frost free, but most things, in fact everything I've got in here, can take a light frost no problem at all, and it's not worth the fuss and bother of putting the fleece down. Unless it gets really cold, and then even then they probably won't die. The growth might just speed checked a little bit and quality might be a little bit reduced. So what else can I think of? Let's take a look outside. So let's have a look outside. So basically I've got gutters on both sides. This is the design I like, so this is what I'll talk about. So what I've got here is, when we took the edges off this polythene, we had about this much spare, cut that in half, and I stuck it to the polytunnel with polytunnel repair tape, and also double-sided tape. So the black here is the double-sided tape, the polythene repair tape sort of seals the edge there. And then that skirt goes into this gutter, and it's stuck into the gutter with polytunnel repair tape. It's worked really well. And then I've just got basically a little plank here that's on legs that supports the gutter, and it's screwed to that. So down at this end here, I've got 3 dip tanks, and these are fantastic because you can just kind of open these up, dip your watering can in, take them straight out. There's just a little hole here through the gutter that goes down here into this tank, and then all 3 tanks are connected together. and then I can pump water out of these tanks into my IBC tanks for storage. So I've got the same at the other side, so I can capture a huge amount of water over winter, and then that keeps me going through most of spring. And then the skirt of the polytunnel itself, which is down here, is kind of wrapped around and then pinned down here at the side of the path, so it creates a really nice seal. So it means less slugs and snails and things like that crawling in there. And then the doors, as you can see, they've got these little bolts that go into holes that are drilled into the paving slabs. So that just works really nicely. And all the doors have got a latch and handles. And this really helps with kind of peace of mind when it's really windy, that you can fasten this door closed and you know for sure, you know, that it's not going to blow open in whatever sort of weather conditions you've got. These are perspex panels here, and then if you take these perspex panels off, and yeah, they just come off like that, then you can kind of get more ventilation. And to be honest, I hardly ever do this. And I've just sort of pulled this little hook off here, which I originally put on here. I can't even remember why I put it on. I don't need it anyway. So yeah, so those little toggles just hold that in place, but I've got EnviroMesh on the back of those if I needed it. And as you can see here, I've got another one of my dip tanks here, and then outside here, this is where I kind of drag containers, so potatoes, courgettes, beans, you know, peas, all those sorts of things, to sort of store them, not to store them, to sort of grow them on once it gets warm enough. And then the chair is vitally important because I really love it. This is a sort of leisure space. I've got another leisure space outside, and I spend a lot of time in here in shorts pretty much all the year round, and so I like to be able to kneel down here on the floor without getting all muddy, and so I tend to sweep it out fairly regularly, like once every 2 weeks or something like that. And it is just landscape fabric, and it's a double layer of landscape fabric, and I've got these little treads here, which are sort of cheap things from Aldi, which have lasted for, I don't know, 5 years or something like that, and they just reduce the wear and tear on this landscape fabric because I don't really want to replace it. So that's pretty much it. I've got a lot more stuff in my ebook and loads more videos, so if you just look at the section on greenhouse and polytunnel gardening, then that should answer more questions. And so my name's Steve, this is the Seaside Kitchen Garden and Allotment channel, and I'll see you soon.